Once there were two good friends. Both of them were Zionists. And they were living in Odessa. Odessa, Ukraine, not Odessa, Texas. When they met, they were barely 20 years old, and over exceptional careers, they would become greats. They found their way to Odessa in the early 1890s because Odessa was the most non-Russian part of Russia, and the city was filled with great Russian writers and great Jewish writers of the day. Dwelling in this town known as the Pearl of the Black Sea, they had come from different worlds, but would shape, maybe, and certainly reflect the worldview of our people. Their work grew in what was the center of Jewish literature up until the Russian Revolution, after which it shifted shores to the New York harbor. Eventually, each man would make aliyah, reflective of their ideological commitment to the Jewish homeland. The truth is, when it comes to these two men, you cannot talk about Hebrew poetry and the revitalization of Hebrew without mentioning their names, and in Israel, there is no town without a street or a boulevard named for one of them. Who are these masters of Hebrew letters? Saul Chernikovsky and Chaim Nachman Bialik. Bialik came from a traditional Jewish education and therefore knew Talmud and Midrash, Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and Aramaic. Chernikovsky had a Russian education and was well-versed in Tolstoy and the like. Chernikovsky knew Latin and Greek and related literature. Bialik knew rabbinic aphorisms and halakha, Jewish law. Chernikovsky translated Bialik into Russian, and in and amongst Chernikovsky's literary progress, he became a medical doctor, ultimately even serving as the doctor for the famous Herzliya Gymnasium in Tel Aviv. Bialik, meanwhile, edited one of the finest assemblages of Jewish teachings, which is still in use to this day. Among Bialik's most famous poems is a brutal look at the reality of what happened to our ancestors in places like Kishinev, where a horrific pogrom in 1903 murdered nearly 50 Jews, injured hundreds, and destroyed hundreds of Jewish homes and businesses. Bialik called the Jews to task for their reluctance to fight, their acceptance of a fate worse than death. The sons of the Maccabees, he called out, who crouched and hid. The desecration of Kishinev was a sad reflection of what life in the diaspora had become, and the time had arrived for us to be and to become more. 10 years earlier, Chernikovsky penned a poem as a 19-year-old filled with hope, faith, and belief, to which I want to draw your attention at this time.
שחקי שחקי על החלומות, זו אני החולם שח, שחקי כי באדם אמין, כי עודני מאמין בך, שחקי כי באדם אמין, כי עודני מאמין בך.
This poem is often translated as Credo, based on its Hebrew title, Ani Ma'amin, I believe. His use of that term, Ani Ma'amin, I believe, is surely a play on the Maimonidean creed of the 12th century, in which another famous Jewish doctor, philosopher, and writer penned a series of beliefs to which the Jew must adhere. Chernikovsky addresses a female creature, a muse, music, literature, all female nouns in Hebrew. Sachki sachaki al halomot, zu ani hacholem sach. Rejoice, rejoice now in the dreams. It is the dreamer who speaks. Rejoice, for I have faith in humankind, for I still believe in you. What a rebuke of God, or at least an implicit rebuke of God. It's not that he doesn't believe in God, it's just that he's saying, I believe in humanity. Despite all that has been, and it was before Kishinev, but Kishinev had happened plenty by the 1890s when he wrote this. Ki od nafshi deror sho'efet, for my soul still yearns for freedom. I have not sold it to a calf of gold, for I shall yet have faith in humankind in its spirit great and bold. Rucho yashlich kavle hevel. That spirit will cast off its binding chains, raise us up, hold high our heads. Workers will not die of hunger. Release for the soul, bread for the poor. Note the biblical metaphor. I did not sell my soul out like those who gave their gold to the golden calf. He still believes in humanity. He's not waiting for a miracle or hoping in some unknown moment of salvation. Chernikovsky loved his Hebrew Bible, where his namesake is found, Saul, but his faith is in the human soul and the strong spirit of humanity. In the language of his era, he speaks about the worker. He who works should not die starving, which becomes the message of the upcoming Russian Revolution, with the masses rising. Socialist ideals were in the air, and Jews like Chernikovsky embraced them. But his next line is even more telling. He believed in friendship and human ties. He knew the need and importance of human connectedness. Sachki ki gam bereut a'amin. A'amin ki odenu emsa lev tikvotai gam tikvotav. Yachush osher yavin ke'ev. Rejoice, for I have faith and friendship. I'll find a heart. In this I have faith, a heart that shares in all my hopes, a heart that feels both joy and pain. And I shall keep faith in the future, though the day be yet unseen. Surely it will happen as peace will come, carrying its blessings from nation to nation. What a splendid 19-year-old. To be so young and hopeful. His vision is filled with imagining the Zionistic aspirations. The future will come through freedom, light, and desire for a better world. His image of the good days of salvation, like that of the Psalms, shows that nations will be at peace. In fact, it is not only about us, it's a broad or a universal aspiration. It has been said that we, Jews, are a particular people with a universal message. Chernikovsky's poem holds that ideal entirely. Chernikovsky will not always be so optimistic and hopeful. In fact, it would be disingenuous of me to present him as if he was. He lived through war and saw the darkest sides of humanity. But in this moment, at this time of our new year beginning, I brought him because with all of the darkness that surrounds us, from a pandemic that has taken nearly 200,000 American lives that we know of, to the ongoing and increasing struggle for racial justice, fires that rage in the West, from forced online living to grave concerns about political divides and public safety, Chernikovsky's belief in humanity is a reminder that we are an eternally hopeful and faithful people. Yashuv yifrach az gam ami. Then my people too will flourish, and a generation shall arise in the land that shake off its chains and see light in every eye. Israel's recent peace with the United Arab Emirates shows us what we have nearly forgotten. Those we once called enemies can be friends too. When the UAE joined hands with Israel, it did so out of a recognition that the work for repentance, healing, growth is not a one-sided street. Our health thrives only when the world thrives. There will be a generation in the land. They will see the light, says Chernikovsky, and if we turn this generation to one that has hope, Yichyeh, ye'ehav yif'al ya'asdor va'aretz omnam chai, lo va'atid v'shamayim, chaye ruach lo ein dai. It shall live, love, accomplish, labor. In the land it is alive, not in the future, not in heaven, and its spirit shall henceforth thrive. Chernikovsky's vision is certainly not of Talmud study and yeshiva living. He came from a worldview which stressed doing. It was not a heaven-like future, but rather actual living in the land where doing and building are central. When all that happens, the poets will then sing a new song as he pulls language from the Psalms. Az shir chadash yashir mishorer. Then a poet shall sing a new song, heart aware of beauty sublime. For them, the youngsters above my tomb, blossoms in a wreath shall surely be twined. To this day, when people go to the Trumpeldor cemetery where he's buried, you will see flowers because of this closing image he crafts. This young man on the shores of the Black Sea gives us a message of hope and optimism, the likes of which we desperately need today. His message is totally human and humane. Like Rosh Hashanah, which celebrates the universal as this holiday marks the beginning of the world, Chernikovsky invites us to have faith, belief, hope, promise in our fellow human being. We are all created in the image, in an image of God. Together we are the composite of what is possible. There is great darkness. There is horrid evil. There is abuse, tragedy, destruction, racism, fear. But so too there is hope, promise, possible, and potential. Where there is danger, there are solutions. Where there is anger, there are loving people. We are as much a part of creation as all those who came before us, who witnessed untold difficulties. No one generation owns the totality of awful. Sadly, we each bear our share. On the cusp of an election, the 44th governor from New York was running for U.S. president. In the heart of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt said, quote, "In these days of difficulty, we Americans everywhere must and shall choose the path of social justice, the path of faith, the path of hope, and the path of love toward our fellow man." I have no idea if FDR knew of Chernikovsky. It is no matter. Their message was the same. And so is the language of our Torah, in its constant and continual calls for justice and love, compassion and mercy toward our fellow human being. May we bring our eternal messages and act accordingly in our day with faith in each other, propelled by the Ancient One who holds us along in our journey. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will. May we make it our own as well. Shana Tova.
כי עודני מאמין בך, שחקי בה, האדם מאמין, כי